Population refers to the population. Population refers to the total number of people occupying or inhabiting a given unit area. Population distribution. This refers to the way people are spread out on a given land. Population density. This describes the concentration of people in a specific area of land that is 1 kilometer square. Demography. This is the study of statistical data of human population. It can be obtained from both primary and secondary sources. Primary sources include registration of persons, for example, birth and deaths, and census and sample surveys. Secondary sources include reports on population compiled and published as census reports. Various factors influence population distribution in East Africa. By the end of the session, you should be able to define population, population distribution, density, and demography. Trade refers to the act of process of buying, selling, or population. The factors influencing population distribution in East Africa can be classified into 4 main groups: physical, historical, economical, and political. We now discuss each of the mentioned factors. Physical factors. These factors include climate and relief. The two most influential elements are rainfall and temperature. Very high temperature, like those experienced in Lodwar and around Lake Magadi, discourage human settlement. Likewise, extreme low temperatures, such as those experienced on high slopes of Mount Kenya, discourage settlement. Rainfall. Places receiving rainfall of over 1,000 millimeters are densely populated. The abundant rainfall favors the production of both food crops and cash crops, for example, the Kenya highlands. Relief. Areas of high altitude have low population because of low temperatures, very steep terrain where soil erosion is rampant. It is difficult to construct roads and houses, and landslide occur. Plains and gently sloping areas attract more settlements. For example, the Lake Victoria Plateau in East Africa. The very flat areas experience poor drainage, which results in swampy conditions or flooding. This discourages settlement. Vegetation. Dense forests are sparsely populated because they harbor wild animals and pests, which can be a danger to human habitation, livestock, and crops. So most forested areas are sparsely populated. For example, Kakamega Forest, Miambo woodlands of Tanzania, and Lambwe Valley are infested with seseflies, which has discouraged human and livestock habitation. The grasslands, on the other hand, are easier to settle on farm and build roads. Soils. Generally, fertile soils like rich volcanic soils and alluvial soils attract human settlement in large numbers. This explains the high population in Kenya highlands with volcanic soils and around Lake Victoria with alluvial soils. On the contrary, infertile leached soils and waterlogged soils have sparse population because they are agriculturally unproductive. The next group of factors is historical factors. Historical factors. The areas affected by slave trade in the 18th century have continued to have light or sparse population because of displacement of many people who were scattered to North America, West Indies, and South America. Colonization also had its effects. The African reserves introduced for Africans had high population, which kept increasing, while the lands taken away for plantation farming had sparse population. Tribal conflicts and wars have led to some places becoming sparsely populated, for example, between Kuria and Maasai in Kenya. Economic factors also play a big role in population distribution. Places where minerals are found or industries set up normally build up heavy settlements. People come for employment and provision of other services, for example, Magadi Town, Mwandui in Tanzania, and Kasese in Uganda. Political factors. Many places which experiences political unrest force large groups of people to migrate to other places. For example, the influx of refugees from southern Sudan, Somali, and Uganda in the 70s increased population where they settled in Kenya, while areas of origin remain sparsely populated. Sometimes government projects displace people into new settlement areas. For example, during the construction of Ndakaine Dam and the Sondumirio Power Project, gazetted national parks and forest reserves prohibit human occupation in such areas. After independence, the former White Highlands are subdivided as high-density and low-density settlement. The low density remains sparse, with high-density settlement has many people. Population growth. Population in most places tends to increase in number, but it can also decrease. This is what is referred to as population growth. Population growth can be referred to as positive growth when there is an increase in number, or negative growth when there is a decrease. The population growth is calculated as either natural or numerical growth. Natural growth. This is described as the natural increase or decrease in population basing on the crude birth rate and crude death rates. Crude birth rate is the estimated rates of births in a year. The crude birth is calculated by dividing the total numbers recorded in a year by the total population in that year and multiplying the fraction by 100. For example, crude birth rate CBR equals to total number of births in a year divided by total population estimated by mid-year multiplied by 100. On the other hand, the crude death rate is calculated using this formula. Crude death rate CDR equals to total number of deaths in a year divided by total population estimated by mid-year multiplied by 1000. From the CBR and CDR, the natural population growth can be obtained. For example, 1969 to 79 census in Kenya showed CBR 54/1000, CDR 14/1000. The natural increase equals to CBR minus CDR divided by 1000 multiplied by 100. This equals to 54 minus 14 divided by 1000 multiplied by 100. The natural population increase is equal to 4%. Numerical population increase. This increase is calculated based on 10 years census records. It can be expressed in percentage. For example, population 1989 was 21,443,636. Population 1999 was 28,686,607. Intercensal increase equals to 7,242,971. The difference between the two census. The percentage population increase is calculated as follows: 7,242,971 divided by 21,443,636 multiplied by 100 equals to 33.77%. Numerical growth gives real increase in population since it considers births and deaths, ignoring migration. Natural growth, on the other hand, focuses on births and deaths, ignoring migration. Factors influencing population growth. Fertility. This refers to the number of live births a woman has during her reproductive period. Some women experience primary infertility or childlessness, or secondary infertility, that is, failure to conceive after getting 1 or 2 children. There is also voluntary infertility, where conception is deliberately prevented. Fertility rate in a given population is the average number of children that a woman of childbearing age will have in her lifetime. The high fertility rate in Kenya has been due to improved nutrition, improved health services, and weakening of traditional customs. The fertility rate in Kenya in 1979 was 8 children, 1989 6.6, and in 1999 is 5. This clearly shows the declining fertility rate. This can be explained by the following factors: more girls attending school, therefore delayed marriage; urbanization, people have adopted for smaller families; modern career opportunities will discriminate women who frequently take maternity leave, leading to voluntary infertility in order to retain their jobs; an increase in the number of women opting to remain single. Mortality. This is number of deaths in a given population. The death rate or mortality rate is the number of deaths per 1,000 per year. These death rates can be classified as child mortality rate, which refers to the number of deaths of children aged between 1 to 5 years per 1,000 births. Infant mortality rate refers to the number of deaths in first year of life per 1,000 live births. Adult mortality rate refers to number of adults dying per 1,000 of the total population. Mortality is of significance because it reduces the population in a given area. Mortality may be caused by an outbreak of war, famine, floods, or epidemics. The death rate in many countries, including Kenya, is declining. This is due to improved medical care. Migration. Sometimes people change their residence permanently or on temporary basis. This movement is described as migration. It involves movement of people into a country, that is, immigration, and the people moving in are called immigrants. On the other hand, emigration is where people leave their native land for another country. They are called immigrants. Migration can be international or internal. Kenya has experienced a migration with influx of refugees from Uganda, Sudan, and Somalia, increasing population in Kenya and reducing in the source countries. Causes of migration. Migration is caused by push and pull factors. Some of the factors include the following: pressure on land, availability of employment opportunities, wars, religious and political conflicts, natural calamities, Government policy: forced migration. Pressure on land: agriculturalists may be forced out of their land or country when the land becomes too poor to support the crops or livestock for subsistence. In Kenya, many people moved from Kisii, Kakamega, Kiambu, Nyeri to Rift Valley and coast regions. Availability of employment opportunities. Job opportunities attract many people to the other countries or towns. For example, there has been an influx of workers from the neighboring countries to the mining towns in South Africa. In Kenya, many people have moved to Nairobi and Mombasa in search of employment. Plantation farming in developing countries has attracted people from their rural homes. Wars, religious and political conflicts. The mentioned factors create suffering and even death, necessitating migration of many people to secure places or countries. Natural calamities. Natural disasters include disease outbreak, floods, severe drought, and volcanic eruption. Many people move to more secure places for people and animals. Government policy. Large-scale development projects by the government may necessitate compensation and relocation of people to create room for the project. For example, the mining of titanium in Kwale has already displaced many people. Forced migration. This type of migration involves a forced transfer of large numbers of people for political, religious, or racial reasons. For example, criminals from Britain were exiled to Australia. Asians in Uganda were expelled by Idi Amin, and the 17th and 18th century slave trade transferred many people from West and East Africa to Latin America, USA, and West Indies, where their descendants are still found. Internal migration. Internal migration involves a movement of people within a country due to pull or push factor. There are 4 forms of internal migration: rural to urban migration, rural to rural migration, urban to rural migration, urban to urban migration. Rural to urban migration, where young people move in search of jobs, entertainment, and education. Rural to rural migration. It involves migration of people from rural area to another rural area for employment in an industry or plantation. Urban to rural migration. Some migrants move from urban areas to rural areas on job transfer, failure to secure employment, or increased insecurity in urban areas. Urban to urban migration. This type of migration occurs when people move from one town to another in search of better employment or business opportunities. External migration. The second type of migration is external migration. This is the movement of people from their own countries to other countries. It is called international migration. The migrants require a passport and visa in order to control this movement. Many people migrate in search of better jobs, for education, to provide specialized skills, and on special arrangements, for example, the green card to USA. Effects of migration. Effect on the place of origin. Migration from rural areas leads to reduction of population from place of origin, causing shortage of labor. It also leads to imbalance in the sex ratio, since in most cases, a majority of the migrants are men. There is a tendency of leaving behind the old, the women, and children who are less productive. Effect on the destination. Destinations of migration experience an increase in population. If the immigrants are involved in gainful employment, the area may develop due to increased production. On the other hand, if the immigrants fails to secure employment, may result to many crimes. The resultant increase of immigrants creates pressure on existing infrastructure, high cost of houses, leads to growth and expansion of slums. Effect on individual. Migration can have both positive and negative effect on an individual, for example, loss of cultural values or improved standards of living. Population structure refers to the composition of a given population in terms of age and sex at a particular time. This information is got during census. The data is compiled and the number of males and females of every age is obtained. The information is commonly presented using an age-sex population pyramid. The shape of the pyramid can bring out the stage of development of a country. By the end of the session, you should be able to explain the significance of population structure of a country's population. Significance of population structure. The composition of a population has important implications about a country's development. For example, planning, calculation of the dependency ratio, and calculation of sex ratio. Planning. The government can formulate policies for social-economic development after the breakdown of population by age and sex. For example, the government determines how to allocate funds for the youth and the elderly, especially for education, health, and social welfare programs. Calculation of dependency ratio. The dependency ratio is the proportion of the population that is unproductive population to the productive. The unproductive population includes children under 15 years of age and old people over 65 years of age. The productive group is the working population between 15 and 64 years. The dependency ratio of a country can be calculated as follows. Dependency ratio equals to children less than 15 years plus old people more than 65 years, working population 15 minus 64. If the dependency ratio is high, the number of dependents is high. Few resources will go to development of the country since consumption is allocated a bigger share. In some areas in Kenya, the number of dependents is increasing on daily basis as the working people succumbs to the HIV/AIDS pandemics. Calculation of sex ratio. Sex ratio is the number of males per 100 females. If the ratio shows more than 100, then males are more less than females. For example, 105 to the ratio of 100. This explains social problems in such a population. On the other hand, if the ratio is less than 100, that is 95 to the ratio of 100, then there is male deficiency, which has a far-reaching effect on fertility. Consequences of population growth. The consequences of population growth vary according to the demographic stage of a country. The consequences are captured in the demographic trends. The demographic or population trends are changes resulting from population growth in different phases. Overpopulation. Overpopulation is a situation whereby a region or country has a population that it cannot be supported fully due to a strain on the available resources. Among the problems that arises from overpopulation are underdevelopment, unemployment, poor housing and health facilities, underutilization of agricultural resources, slow industrial growth, increased bias in traditional attitudes, and effect on gross domestic product (GDP). Underdevelopment. Rapid population growth leads to underdevelopment due to a large proportion of children who are dependent on the relatively small working population. The large number of young people puts an extra strain on the social amenities, for example, educational facilities. Underdevelopment. Rapid population growth leads to underdevelopment due to a large proportion of children who are dependent on the relatively small working population. The large number of young people puts an extra strain on the social amenities, for example, education facilities. Poor housing and health facilities. The standard of living is usually low in overpopulated countries. Slum settlements are widespread, especially in urban areas. The standards of nutrition and general hygiene are low. This leads to malnutrition and the spread of diseases. The overwhelming number of people leads to a massive strain on the available social amenities. Underutilization of agricultural resources. A large population may lead to shortage of land and land fragmentation. This situation, coupled with use of traditional techniques and inadequate finance to purchase inputs and misuse of marginal lands, lead to low production. Slow industrial growth. This generally arises from a large but unskilled labor force and many people with low purchasing power, discouraging expansion. Increased bias in traditional attitudes. Large populations, mainly in developing countries, are conservative regarding to artificial birth control, introduction of new crops, and education. This attitude leads to slow development. Effect on gross domestic product (GDP). Gross domestic product is the value of all goods and services produced in a country within a specific period. Overpopulation makes it difficult for a government or community to invest in productive activities, keeping the GDP down or even to decline. This lowers the standard of living in the country. A big population, however, can be advantageous by providing a large market for goods and services and a source of cheap labor. Underpopulation. On the other hand, underpopulation is a situation whereby there are too few people to fully develop the economic potential of an area or nation. The consequences of underpopulation include uneven distribution of population. In some areas, the population density is very low, such that the acute shortage of labor and the resources lie unexploited. Related study on population in Kenya and Sweden. The comparative table of facts given presents a summary between the two countries.